Hey there, McAllister here with Toasty DIY, and today I want to talk to you all about MCDM's newest backer packet, play test of Draw Steel, their tabletop RPG. And I just want to tell you 5 things that were kind of surprising to me as somebody who plays D&D 5e and has grown up learning that system and the D&D system all around. I've dipped my toes in Pathfinder, personally, read the books and, looked at other ones, but I haven't really played a campaign in any other setting. Well, I've played at least a one-shot inside of the Draw Steel campaign, playset. And I want to talk about some things that I think are cool that you all might like as people who come from D&D 5e or wherever your background is. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact you can't go down in Matthew Colville's for the most part. So the first thing I want to talk about is in Draw Steel, you can't really go down unless you want to. So if you want to go unconscious, that's kind of going to be a full TPK situation, because what happens is once you hit 0 health, you need to go under, I believe, your winded value. Just consider it like your bloodied value. You need to go negative your health to become dead. You still running. Think of those moments in your favorite shonens where the protagonist is like, if I stop moving, I'll pass out. That's kind of the idea. Because before this, you have the option to use the catch breath action to recover health. At this point, you don't have that option anymore. If you catch your breath, you're going to pass out. So it pushes you to go further. If you do any of your actions, you're going to roll a d6 and take damage for doing them because you are stressing your body beyond what is capable of a human being or your racial choice. You're going beyond what that body can do, and therefore you can't stop moving. But I think this is really cool because it adds to this element of, guys, I'm beyond my limit here. Like, somebody help me out or I'm going to die. This demon is right here, and if he does another attack on me and I have to defend myself, I might die. So please push him away from me. Let's do that. And so that brings us right to the second point, which is pushing. The mechanic for pushing and to move people around is very dynamic and very cool. And it was something that I think my players had a lot of interest doing, and it makes the game more tactical. If you played games like Into the Rift before, a big part of that game is you see where the enemies are going to move, and you have to use your robots to perfectly create a chain of events that's what you want to happen instead of what the monsters want to happen. That is the feeling I get when I'm watching my players talk about their moves during this, especially when we found out people are reading their trigger actions for the first time, which will be another one that I want to talk about. But when they were looking into that, they were having a lot of fun realizing they could push people and they could move them. And when they found out that you can push someone into a wall and that they move further than the wall, you can break it. I think the idea is, if you push them with an ability that says push 2, right? You're probably going to assume what that means. It means you're going to push them, if the ability works, 2 squares. And since you're going to push them 2 squares, let's say the first square they move, then they reach glass. If they reach glass, it takes 1 extra to push them through the glass. So if it's move 2 and they're against the wall and there's glass there, it's 1 to go through the glass and then they're through it. If it's a wooden wall, for instance, they need to have 2 more movement by the time they reach the wall. So if it's a push 2, they need to be against the wall when you cast the spell or do the ability. It depends on that. But it's really fun when they start looking at these things, and we found out one of the people has the ability to make push effects stronger. So even when it's not their turn, they're like, I'm going to push that. That's funny. Because our warrior had the ability, or our fury had the ability to throw a guy up in the air. I didn't know the falling mechanics at this point, but they came up with the idea instantly that let's just push him further in the air so he takes all the damage when he hits the floor, or he'll be stuck falling for a whole round and we'll be safe from him. And that was a good idea on their part. The guy had very low health, so he ended up landing on a sword and dying. But the idea that you can just push somebody and just have this stability idea that you're really looking at the field is more dynamic. If you played Baldur's Gate 3, you probably pushed people a lot. And it was fun to do. It was funny more often than not, but it was very effective in some places. I feel that mechanic comes more into shape in MCDM's Draw Steel. Number 3, triggered actions. If you have players that sit there at the table and are usually on their phones, just kind of peeking around while they're waiting for their turn, researching spells and whatnot, kind of figuring out what they're going to do, that's on the nice end if they're not just bored because it's been 30 minutes since their turn. The triggered reactions help add something to it. And this is only first level. My players are having a lot of fun using triggered reactions to keep popping things out. Now, combat took a while because we're learning it for the first time. The triggered reactions allowed, they're essentially reactions from D&D, but on a trigger. So if someone takes damage, if a push ability is within 30 feet of you, if so on and so forth, if the if statement is met, the triggered ability can be used. You get 1 till it can be able to your turn again, unless you have a free triggered ability. None of my players had them, but it's going to be really cool when they have free triggered abilities to be like, I'm going to buff your attack +2. I'm going to push yours further. And maybe they're doing 3 free triggers. I would hope that level 3 characters have 2 to maybe 2 of them. Around level 5, maybe 3 of them. They get like 2 levels to learn their new trigger. So that way it becomes second nature, because the idea they won't become bored because they're just waiting for their conditions to be met. It really enhanced that idea of, well, you push them, or the Fury, you go first. A lot of the things that MCDM has talked about, specifically Matthew Koval during his like little devlogs when he talks about it, came true in my game, and I was very surprised that the mechanics were able to enforce it, and it was simple enough. Once they got the idea of how the mechanic fail system worked, that was very cool. They were just starting to roll off it. They were really riffing. It didn't take them long, but it will take a while to learn the intricacies. For them to min-max their combat is going to take a while. But the initial up and running, once you kind of read the rules and teach them the basics, it's a lot of fun. After pushing, I'd say that the thing that's really interesting is you have attacks never missing. And attacks never missing plays a big hand in this, and I like it a lot because with them not missing, you have the chance for them to do good damage, especially to minion groups, which is really nice. So that's going to be my 5th point, is minion groups. But the idea that you're not going to miss, you're not going to waste your turn, you may get less out of it than you wanted. There is kind of this expectation of, if you know you got the lowest outcome, it almost feels like a miss. Progress is at least being made. You have that kind of, I didn't do well today, but at least I participated, versus I didn't even hit anything this whole fight. I never did any damage. At some point, you're going to be kind of keen to do damage to minions, and you're going to be able to hit them. Even if you do the lowest level, you might take out 2 minions because you are a hero and they are a grunt. Speaking of minion groups, I love this mechanic. I've never thought about doing it this way, but I think it is part of the biggest moments of heroic fantasy is when I think like Rome Total War and these games, I think it's cool when you battle giant armies, but Total War, Warhammer, when you have like one dwarf getting charged by a battalion of foot soldiers and they just slam the ground, everyone goes flying. It's one of the coolest moments for any fantasy player, I think, is when they are truly, the city guard all need to show up at one time just to stop them because they're that strong, because they can go through swaths of people. The game's mechanics promote this with the idea that skeletons don't each have their own HP, which, thank God, when you have 10 skeletons as a dungeon master, it's annoying. But instead, they kind of act as a horde, or they call them minion rules. So anybody who has the name skeleton is going to be its own acting unit. When it's a skeleton's turn, it's all the skeletons. They all move, they all attack at once, they do their whole thing. It's really easy to calculate that damage. But the fun thing is when your players hit them, a skeleton, let's say, has 5 HP. That's not how it is in the book, or may not be, I don't remember. It's 5 HP for a skeleton, and your player does 12 damage. That's enough to kill 2 skeletons. So you track it as one giant hit pool and just kill the 2 skeletons they want to kill, or, ask them how do they do it. And when they describe it, you pull off the 2 minis that most fit the cool, badass thing they were doing, they were happy to do. And I think that's awesome, because there's so many times in your heroic fantasies where you're just going through hordes of people, and it feels good when you do we had a guy do a bow shot, and I was like, how does your bow shot kill 2 people? He's like, well, when they're scrambling, I think it goes through both their necks. And it's like, absolutely it does. They fall to the ground. In D&D, I feel like they're less heroic fantasies, at least in my opinion. When you're level 3, you're just starting to be heroic. And you're just starting to be able to pull off these shots, because it's always weird when you say, I shoot them both straight through the neck, and then 3 rounds later, you're just missing every shot. You can't miss in this game. So that mechanic helps the fantasy stay more real. But I love that, because when you're just tracking skeletons, sniper, archers, I was really worried when I saw that he had all these special unique types for each type of army, but it's more like a war game. You're going to build your little points, your armies out, and then you just take damage from all of them together instead of worrying about whose turn is it. Is it skeleton archer number 1, 2, or 3s? For me, it has always become a big issue because I only have a certain amount of budget for minis. And it's like, I can't have 1,000,000 minis sitting on my table, each uniquely made, because I have the time to paint them by themselves. I run a game every week. I don't have the time to do that. I have a lot of minis, but I don't have an infinite budget and time to paint them. So it's nice to know that, oh, that one's holding a bow. I know I would have made that an archer. Oh, these guys have axes. I'll make them raiders. It's going to be way easier to remember that. And then I'll have my one unique mini be the captain, and that's going to be cool. And I think overall, it's just a very cool mechanic. Now, on the negative end, I found the negotiation system hard to run. It became better as we ran it. I think I had them run it 3 or 4 times in the campaign, so that they did. I didn't necessarily save it for special people. I just ran it whenever they got into a situation where they wanted something from somebody. Normally, I don't think you'd do this. You would save it for special occasions, but I was doing it because I thought this was the mechanic I knew the least. I need the most exposure to it, and they need the most exposure to it. And it helped a little bit, but I think as written, it's a little difficult for me to understand. I think it'll help me when I get to watch somebody else run it, I think a lot of people learn their early stages of D&D from seeing it played or being brought in by very experienced players. It's always hard when you're the first one to do it for the first time. But there's also the fun of you don't have a standard set by yourself because you don't know. I think the negotiation system was a little rough around the edges for me, but that's the only con I had, even though I used it 3 times because I was excited to use it. And it was fun at some point to be able to say, that's the end of the negotiation. They have no more patience for you. That saves me from these role-playing moments where they just keep dragging somebody through the mud, trying to get every last bit out of them. And it's happened before, I'm sure, in your games. It's happened in mine. And I like the idea that it does bring an end. If there's not a health bar for it, they'll keep chipping away. So I do like that, but I did have a negative time running it personally. Positive hopes for it, however. I think once I get more around it, they understood the idea that the higher the patience is. I just read them out the rules of, oh, you can get no, no, but, yes, yes, and, yes, except, whatever. And I had fun doing that and getting to tell them that so they understood that every time they get it, they're getting a little bit more out of it. It was a fun back and forth. So they would present me an argument instead of just babbling back and forth with this person. I think if you're less of a role player, that's very helpful on both ends. I think if you're a good role player, it can help make it very fun because you can close it by saying, is that your argument? And if they say yes, you're like, all right, then now let's see if it applies to the current, are they revelry? Are they legacy based? Whatever. One of my players eventually, like during the third negotiation we did, fully understood the idea of, oh, this person cares about their legacy, and they targeted it correctly. And I think that was a good feeling for them, and it was fun to see. But all in all, those were my thoughts of Draw Steel. I had a great time. I want to run it again. I want to run at a higher level. I think level 3 of Draw Steel will be like running a level 5 to 6 campaign, which I feel gets out of hand and stops becoming fun because there's not a lot of team coordination. Once your turn's over, there's really little you can do. Not every combat can be the big bad. So how do you engage them during those? I fail to do it around those levels, and I feel that comes from a perspective of somebody who, I write a combat, one player can't show up. Oh, it's our tank. This is going to be a little bit difficult. Some people have this, some people have that. It's going to be difficult to balance this encounter. I think it'll be easier to balance through these Draw Steel encounters because I'll just be able to play with the +1 or +2 or +3 damage and just change that number as opposed to changing my whole stat block every time or changing the dice I roll to possibly get a better one. I like it because there's nothing more annoying to your players when you're having to roll to hurt them and it takes forever because you have to do it for 8 skeletons, but instead I'm just rolling 1 set of dice. I'm doing my X amount of damage times 3. If you know your multiplication tables, your combat's going to run faster. That's it. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'd be happy to answer them. If you had a confusion during the rules that you'd like me to specify, I'd love to talk about the rules more because the more I read them, the better I'll get. I may not know your answer immediately, but I can hop on here and talk about it. Anything else you all want to know, just let me know. Thank you, and take care.